So welcome once again to Living in the 21st Century. Joining me is Professor Maksym Yali of Ukraine. Maksym, it's a pleasure to have you on the show again.
Yes, me too, Errol. I'm also pleased.
Yeah, so tell me, Maksym, I know recently we discussed getting aid for Ukraine and so forth, but I want to talk a little bit about you personally, how you are surviving and so forth, considering this war, how you have to protect your family, still work. How is your life going right now?
Of course, my life just the same as millions of Ukrainians during last 5 months since the end of February changed very seriously. Of course, nobody, most of us of Ukrainians couldn't imagine that just a year ago, even half a year ago, that such war could happen in the 21st century. And of course, the things we could see only in movies in the 1980s, 1990s, in American movies, now we can see on our streets. Explosions every day, almost missile attacks where children, women die. A lot of people saw death, people lost their homes, even cities. If talk about me personally, yes, I come from Mariupol, and my mother, sister, and niece with her 2 small children were there. And it was one of the biggest challenges, I would say, for me personally during this war. Not one of, but the biggest, was to evacuate them from that hell. Because as you know, in March, I lost connections. There was no water, gas, anything, connection, and only explosions, air bombs dropping every hour on the city, and you can't even check up and to be sure that your closest relatives are safe and not killed. And of course, in Kiev, it was also a difficult situation, especially during the first weeks after the war, full-fledged war started. Of course, they were trying to capture Kiev. It was very important to evacuate my son. And I decided to stay in Kiev. I didn't want to flee, to become a refugee, and I knew that I can be needed. I didn't serve in army, but I decided firstly to work on informational front, what I can do best. And second, if Russians would get through the defense and invade Kiev, I was ready to join territorial defense, as thousands of Kiev citizens were ready to and did it in late February. So they were queues, and there was no such a strong need. Only specialists who served in army were chosen the first ones. So as I mentioned, first of all, I decided and I needed badly to evacuate my family. It took a month. Since I lost connection with them, and since and when they finally left Mariupol, and I could hear their voice. So I can say it was one of the happiest episodes in my life. Also, I couldn't imagine that just the usual chat with your mother you do regularly for many years can be so, I would say, treasurable and important when you hear for the first time their voices, that they're safe and sound, and in that hell survived, where more than 20,000 civilians were killed. At least this figure could increase. Now it's an approximate figure, yes, of local authorities. Of course, you can change your attitude to life, to everything. You treasure a common thing, for example, when you can't even find food, water. It was in Kiev also, because all shops were closed. People fled from Kiev, millions of people. So huge traffic jam. So, I can tell you my emotions and impressions for a very long time, because there were so many of them. They were colorful, of course, but of course they were tragical as well. Because when you see every day, you get up and go to sleep after news how many civilians more were killed, where this time, these days, Russian missiles were dropped, and it's like this: air raids, air rains. It's like, already usual thing. People even lost the feeling of danger and didn't react. But during last week, when there were several serious missile attacks on Vinnytsia, Kremenchuk, before then, where many people died, huge rockets were launched by Russia. Of course, now people take care more to their safety, and we still feel this war every day and every moment.
Is the support from America and its allies still constant?
Well, unfortunately, if you see the reports, in May we received less weapons, though the situation on front line is getting more and more serious, and Russians changed their strategy after they lost the battle for Kiev. Now in Donbass, those territories still occupied by Ukraine are in the center of attacks. So they occupied already Luhansk region. Finally, it took them 4 months. But of course, we need weapons. We need MLRS systems, and more because of these changed conditions. And unfortunately, some of our alliances like France, Germany, they hesitate to help. They still entertain a hope that it's possible to find a solution on the table, to negotiate with Putin, maybe to lose some territory, what Ukrainian people will not accept, and our President Zelensky as well. So, and that's why, besides it's summer, governments, just officials have vacations, and of course, situation in Ukraine is getting more and more dangerous. More and more different weapons are used. And the possibility of these terrorist acts also very high every day. So unfortunately, we don't receive as much military, first of all, help as we needed. Because, as I mentioned, situation and conditions have changed, and bureaucracy in Europe, also in US particularly. Of course, it takes time, but every day, every hour is treasured for us, for Ukraine, and we hope that we'll get more aid, military, because we showed, for example, during last week's HIMARS, American MLRS systems, we received only 8 of them. But with the help of these just few MLRS, for example, Russians use hundreds of them every day. We just had very good successes, and they lost many commanders and shells, rockets, missiles. So, of course, we hope we'll get it more, because to change situation for Ukraine, we need more weapons, because Russians have much more, 10 times, 20 times on some points on the front line. And of course, they concentrate forces. They have a lot of rockets, shells, artillery since Soviet Union was left. And Ukraine, we also had one of the biggest military potentials. But firstly, we gave up our nuclear weapons. We had the third potential in the world for guarantees for our sovereignty and territorial integrity. United States, Russian Federation, Great Britain gave us these promises, so-called guarantees. But as you see in 2014, Putin violated them, started war, annexed illegally Crimea, and started war in Donbass. Since then, our just allies in Europe, especially France and Germany, we're trying to find political solution, but they don't understand the mentality of Putin. They don't understand the mentality of Russian people. This war can be finished only if our allies will increase assistance to us, military, financial. Also, we need, because our economy, of course, has very serious problems. And it's just left only a few months when the situation can be changed. If we get more weapons, MLRS, first of all, artillery, we can just start an offensive and take back occupied territories to have success and to finish this war. But if we don't get this assistance, if it is not increased, of course, this war will take months, even maybe years, because for Putin, he needs to win in this war, or at least to sign a treaty where Ukraine would give up some territories for him to show that this war was not in vain to Russian people. So there are so many problems, and of course we highly need the increase of support of our allies, and for them to finally understand that this war only just if, as they consider, local conflict, but if Russia wins, for example, let's put theoretically, they will not stop, of course, and their politicians telling it already, not hiding their ambitions, then Poland, then Baltic states, they want to restore Russian Empire, and it included, for example, in 19th century, territory of Poland, Finland, and many other European states. So, as I mentioned, we highly need the increase of support of our allies for us to put to stop this aggression and threat to international security.
Okay. Do you think, first and foremost, when this war is all over, will Ukraine go back to a nuclear nation in terms of developing nuclear arms? And secondly, do you think that Putin, considering all these war crimes that have been committed against Ukraine, do you think that Putin should be charged as a war criminal and held to that standard as a war criminal?
I'll start my answer with the end of your questions. Of course, I am sure, I think that Putin is a war criminal, because to start war in the 21st century, to launch missiles, rockets to shops, markets, where just in prime time, where there are a lot of people, as it was in Kremenchuk 10 days ago, as it was in Vinnytsia just yesterday. Children, women, elderly people, already thousands of them actually killed, because statistics of the United Nations doesn't give the real situation. They consider about 400 children have died. But of course, only Mariupol, much more. As I mentioned, we can't even just understand how many civilians were killed there. And of course, he is a war criminal, because he does it in spite. It's tactics of a terrorist to kill as many civilians as possible, to make them be afraid of Russia, of war, and to put a pressure on President of Ukraine to stop, to sign a capitulation, etc., as they want and they say. So they, as I mentioned, they kill civilians. They do it with a goal. They know that they shoot civilians, that they launch missiles which can just lose the direction and hit a civilian object, as it happened already many times. So of course he's a war criminal. Of course we hope that international society will finally make such a decision to extract, for example, first of all, what they need, international society to make Russia leave Security Council of United States, not to have a veto right, because they block all such like initiatives, like international investigation groups or courts. There were propositions after Malaysian Boeing was shut down in 2014 in Ukraine by Russian rocket system. Everybody knew that it was Russians because they controlled that territory, and we didn't use such weapons. And it was checked, and a lot of proofs. But still, no reaction, no international court. In The Hague, they started investigation. It's good, but it takes a lot of time. So many civilians who suffered in 2014, 2015, just also they issued to the European Court of Rights, etc. But they don't follow international law. They don't obey it. So therefore, they hope, of course, I mean Putin and his team, to escape responsibility. So that's as for this question. As for nuclear status of Ukraine, of course, it's impossible. We know, so we were the first country in the world who gave up its nuclear status. As I mentioned, it was number 3 in the world. But of course, we know that we have agreements, though a lot of Ukrainians would like us to restore nuclear status, because if you have a neighbor such as Russian Federation, who has the second nuclear potential in the world, who is ready to wage wars, who considers your territories there, and want to take it back, as Putin mentioned. Of course, for example, if we have a peace treaty tomorrow, it will not mean that the war is over, because it's an existential war, because it's a war for history. Russia stole from Ukraine a lot of things, and without Ukraine, Russia cannot be empire. And of course, if we had nuclear weapons, of course, there wouldn't have happened annexation illegal of Crimea. This war wouldn't start. Of course, it would be much easier if you have. It's much easier if you have a nuclear power, nuclear weapons. But at the same time, we understand that it's impossible to restore it tactically. Of course, we have a potential, we can do it. But of course, international society, our allies, United States, particularly European Union, will not allow us to do it because of security, as you know. But we'll see what will happen. We'll see. It depends how United States and the rest of the free world would manage to escape North Korea. They already have it, actually. Yes, Iran. There are a lot of nuclear threats, and of course, if Ukraine declares that we are ready to take back our nuclear status, it will endanger international society and international security. And we need just to restore our military potential without nuclear weapons. If we get enough of them, middle-range missiles, it's enough. We don't need nuclear weapons.
Okay. Do you have any statistics on the losses of the Russian army, artillery, etc.? What are their strengths and weaknesses right now?
So it's coming closer to 40,000 killed, more than 100,000 wounded. It's about 39,000. More than 1,500 tanks, just more than 100 aircrafts. So it's very easy to find these statistics. Our general staff gives it every day. But the figures, of course, very big, very huge. Of course, we don't kill as many as we did in the first days because, as I mentioned, they changed the tactics, and now they just firstly keep shelling. They could shell, for example, there were such days, 1,000 shells every hour. So 24,000 shells and rockets during one day. That's for you to understand the scale of this war, which has taken place now in Donbass, in the Battle of Donbass. And as I mentioned, now they don't throw people as they did during first days and weeks when they were sure that they will conquer Ukraine for 10 days, mostly just for 2 weeks, but they failed. And now they changed the tactics. Firstly, it's a war of artillery now. So the more shells you have, they have advantage, they use it. The more artillery you have, so they ruin everything, and then only after that Russian soldiers go there, or they throw some who were mobilized in Donbass on occupied territories, just they throw them to understand where our positions are. So they use them as cannon meat, I would say. There is such a phrase. So the figures are about like that. But also we can't be for sure, because as I mentioned, we can't now collect these figures. Could be even more.
What fraction of Ukraine would you say now is totally destroyed?
Beg your pardon?
What fraction is probably destroyed right now at this time of Ukraine?
What part you mean?
Land mass. Okay, like for example, cities that were destroyed. If you look at everything in totality, is a third of Ukraine in ruins, or like 25%?
No, not as much. So far, about 22%
Okay.
Of Ukrainian territory is occupied, but it doesn't mean it is completely ruined.
Right.
Such cities, as I mentioned, as Mariupol, it is completely ruined. 90% of all houses are destroyed. People lost their homes, as for me, for example, and my family, members of my family. They need to hire flats, just find some job, etc., etc. Millions of refugees. But at the same time, as I told you, some cities, particularly in Donbass, are completely ruined, of course. Luhansk region, Donetsk, a part of it, half of it, I would say. But still, that cities are destroyed completely. But the rest are more or less not safe. But if to compare with the situation of Donbass, the situation is okay. Besides such cities as Kharkiv, million people living there also every day. They keep shelling. A lot of buildings were ruined, some districts, I would say. So Chernihiv suffered greatly. Kiev, but it's too big. But also there were a lot of missiles during first 2 months, and now once in 1 or 2 weeks, some are launched on Kiev. But as I can't tell you for sure the statistic how many of the country is ruined, but I guess maybe 3-4%, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, we're coming up on the final 2 minutes, but briefly just explain what frame of mind do you think most Ukrainians are in right now at this time? Do they still standing strong together as one, believing that this will pass and they shall come up victorious?
Of course, we are sure that we shall win, because we don't have any other choice. Because Putin wants just to destroy, to delete Ukrainian nation as it is. And Ukrainian state. For us, it's a war. It's an nothing stake. We can only win. Otherwise, we will just be erased from the earth, from the map of the world, and many people also would die. So still we are united, but of course, as I mentioned, we are hoping that our allies, just common citizens, would keep giving us assistance. And as for military assistance, we need it much more. And without our allies, we cannot win, because Russia is a huge country, yes, 10 times more than Ukraine, and military potential, economical. So without support of our allies, we cannot win this war. But if we have enough of help, weapons, so money also, we are sure we shall win, and Ukrainian people are very sure about that.
Right. Well, Professor, on this note, we come basically to the end of our program. I'm sure this won't be the last minute we talk. There's a lot more to speak on in the future. Until then, take care of yourself, protect your family, stay alive, and God be with you.
Thank you, Errol.
And all those who have been tuning in or living on the 21st century, I want to say thank you and have a nice day. Bye-bye.